Okay, welcome back everybody to the second session of session B. So we've just two presentations left in this session. So the first one, Tara is going to cover specifications and complementary actions, so covering some of the issues again and some of the questions that have been coming up. And I'm going to do a final presentation just looking at the inspections process and the evaluation, some comments on that. So thank you.
Thanks, Jerome. Okay, everybody, it's the last talk I'll be giving today. So it's specifications and complementary actions. This isn't too long. So there's a late meadow bonus payment available that you're aware of. It's for meadows that are mown after July the 1st, and the payment on that is €50 per hectare. The specifications that are needed for that is the meadows must be closed up with no grazing or machinery for 6 weeks prior to cutting. And it's for those meadows that are cut on or after July the 1st up until the end of August. And it's, if the weather is unsuitable for making hay, you can make haylage, provided it is turned. The claim process for the late meadows, then when you go on to GLAMS on the low input grassland scorecard section, there'll be an indicator question there for you that to answer. The farmer is interested, intends to claim late meadow bonus payment on this field, yes or no. There'll be no, you don't need to worry about leaving out any questions on GLAMS because it's set up in such a way that that you won't be able to move forward with the screen or onto the next question until it's complete. You've answered everything. And to claim for the late meadows, then we will need a geotagged photograph giving a clear representation of the mown meadow, and that's to be submitted to DAFIN on the date of mowing or within 5 days of mowing activities. So it must be, within those 5 days, it has to be prior to significant grass regrowth. That photo can be taken by either the farmer or the farm advisor. Specifications for margins, I think we'll have covered all of this already. There's in the low input grassland scorecard, you've all margins are voluntary in both scorecards. So if you have a field that you're going to score for low input grassland, you could have a choice of putting in no margins, or you could put in a 1 metre margin along 1 metre or along one boundary, along every boundary, or you could put in a 2 metre margin or a 3 metre margin. For multi-species lays, that the margins must be fenced as well, and you also have an option for putting in a 5 metre margin in the multi-species lays. Strongly advised to put in margins to help increase score, and particularly in the in both, but in the multi-species lays especially. And there's up to 60 marks going for that. In the case of a low input grassland, obviously, of course, this only applies to low input grassland scorecard. In every scenario, in the multi-species lay scorecard, that all to receive marks for the margins question in the multi-species lay scorecard, all margins must be fenced. You won't receive any marks unless margins are fenced in the multi-species lay scorecard. In the low input grassland scorecard, if you have a grassland that looks like this type of thing, then you probably, well, more than likely will not need the requirement will not be there to fence the margins, and you will get the points anyway. However, in order to get those points anyway, you must achieve a combined score of 35 marks from the answers to question 1 and question 2 on the low input grassland scorecard. How many positive indicator species are present in the field, and what is the cover of those positive indicator species present in the field. But this photograph is shown here because this is the sort of grassland that we're talking about that doesn't need the fenced margins. So if you're trying to show us a field that is semi-improved and that's not very, very species rich, it probably won't reach the 35. Okay, it might get close to the 35, but not all will. So all field margins have to be fenced by the 15th of July for low input grassland. Temporary fencing for pigtails can be used for the 15th of August for multi-species lays, and prior to advisory field assessment, whichever is soonest. Between September and the end of February, margins must be managed by either being mulched, mown or cut or flailed. It's recommended to remove the cuttings in low input grassland, but in the MSL, in the multi-species lay, the cutting must be removed because you won't have any flowering plants for pollinators. But it's the same in both, really, that, you know, if you're leaving grass there, grass is going to act as nutrient enrichment. It's going to enrich that ground, and it's going to stop flowers from growing there, or from the density of flowers, the cover of flowers from being great there. So it's in a farmer's best interest that they do this, because if they want to increase their cover of positive indicators in the low input grassland scorecard, well, you know, increasing the fertility in those margins through cutting them and mowing them and leaving the mown grass there, it isn't going to help. It'll just lead to grass growth. Fertilizer lime can't be spread on the margin of pesticides, not permitted. Spot treatment of weeds only. Extra marks beside watercourses or drainage ditches, and those margin must be additional to any relevant nitrates buffers. Jerome mentioned that yesterday. 5 additional marks per field for low input grassland scorecard if there is a margin beside a watercourse, and 10 additional marks for a field in multi-species lay if a margin is beside a watercourse. Now on to complementary actions, and there's so complementary actions. These are additional things and are voluntary that a farmer may decide to do, or you may decide not to do, and they're just associated with the field boundary score. So these actions, they're more like prescriptive actions that you'd be more familiar with, I suppose, from GLAS and other agri-environment schemes. Prescriptions that you must follow, and there's 3. So there's hedgerow planting, there's hedgerow gapping up, and there's tree planting. But the hedgerow gapping up specification is the same as the hedgerow planting specification. So there's only 2 specifications there to follow. And there's 2 documents. There's online. There's the Word document showing specifications, but everything that's in that Word specifications document is also in the farmer information booklet. So the specification on how to do, I'll show it later on in this presentation, the specification on how to plant a new hedgerow or how to plant trees is on pages 26 and 27 of that booklet that you already have. The allowance per holding is €1,200 per holding, which equates to 130 trees per farm, because it costed €9.20 per tree. And new hedgerow planting is paid on at €15.80 per metre, the same for gapping up. So that €1,200 would get you 76 metres of new hedgerow or gaps. And the aim is to improve the boundary score. So when you're in the field and you're filling in the scorecard and you're there and you're marking on the map, the field margins, you're marking on the map the field boundary, margins and boundaries. You also mark on the map where complementary actions are proposed. And so that when you go to GLAMS to upload the scorecard, that you can do it there as well. Actions are only permitted in project fields, and they're screened automatically by DAFM, because they won't be permitted in Natura 2000 sites, in nature reserves, proposed national heritage areas, landscapes targeted for breeding waders such as curlew, or on an archaeological monument. So when you try to, you will know whether the actions are permitted or not, because when you try to map them in GLAMS, it will restrict you from doing so if you're in one of these locations. The claims for complementary actions is that the procedure for that hasn't been finalised yet, so we'll produce the detail for a claims process for that to follow in a circular to all advisors. But they're once-off payments and verified through Agri-Snap application, and all planting must be completed by the 31st of March 2022. So there's a short window, because this is a 2-year project, but there's only one planting season really for putting in these complementary actions, such a farmer wishes to do so. The planting season doesn't start until November this year, and so November through to the end of March next year. So you've only got one planting season in this 2-year project in which to put in any complementary actions, but they are voluntary. And this is a copy of the specification from the for the two specifications from the project information booklet that you all have. So for planting trees, you know, it's a short specification, but each item on the specification must be followed. If you prefer to read it in a Word document, the Word document for the specifications is online in the REAP section as well. So the time of year is between November and March. Trees must be of native provenance and from the list that's there on the right. And the requirements are the trees should be at least 1.5 metre tall, a 3 metre distance between each tree planted, and the trees are protected with appropriate fencing from livestock. The trees must be maintained. They'd be a little bit hardier now than trees that you would have planted for some other schemes, perhaps because they're of bigger size. So that there won't be the more chance of them being alive in subsequent years, but they still need to have weeds and controlled a little bit until they're established properly. And you must replace any planted trees that die in that first year. And each tree to be tied and staked and tied securely using flexible rubber and adjustable tree ties. Then the planting a new hedgerow or gapping up, same specification for each. And this is on page 26 of your farm information booklet. It's also on the specifications Word document in the REAP folder online. Again, plants must be of native provenance and purchased from registered producers or growers. Firstly, prepare the ground along a 1.5 metre wide strip to provide good soil conditions and as little competition from other vegetation as possible. Same time of year, between November and March, plant a double staggered row with 6 plants that they're 2-year-old whips, 6 plants per metre, using a mix of species from the list here. And no one species should make up more than 70% of the total. Then we're asking for a tree to be planted every 50 metres, but that tree can be just one of these hedgerow plants that's left to grow on as a tree. And well, how will you know whether it's that, you know, to not manage it or not cut it with the hedgerow? Well, tip is that you can mark it with a brightly coloured tag or a tree guard, so you know its location, that's been left to grow as a tree. Maintenance is required for hedgerows too, so you have to keep free of weeds until the plants have established. So annual maintenance will be needed, and to replace any that have died over the between seasons. Protect from livestock again. And that hedge must be at least, if you're putting in a new fence, that fence must be at least 1 metre out from the hedgerow. And you know, you're better off giving it a bit more space, because that hedge will need to be moved as the hedgerow expands over time. So yeah, I said this was short. This is just a short recap on what has to be submitted to DAFM for the entire REAP project from an assessments perspective. So what you need to do is a completed scorecard for each field scored. So a completed low input grassland scorecard for each low input grassland field scored. A completed multi-species lay scorecard for each multi-species lay field scored. The scorecards are available online, which is, you probably have your copies there in front of you. We'll also be sending you card versions in the post. I mentioned yesterday, and I reiterate again, that when you're in the field, use one that you've printed off from the website. that card would be used as reference, because you'll destroy it if you start writing on that for a couple of fields. So just use that as a reference and write on the paper ones. Bring a clipboard with you and write on those paper ones in the field. The versions that we put up online, Jerome said just before break that there's a typo in there for question 3, but we'll have that typo corrected on the online version. So the ones that you'll be using in the field will be exactly correct. Every word in there is correct. And it's just the card reference one that we've Jerome is going to point it out again to us before the end of this morning. That typo that's in there on the card version of the scorecard. So you give a completed scorecard for each field scored. Then you what we want on GLAMS is the boundaries and the fence margins drawn for each field. If the boundaries are a hedgerow or a stone wall or a tree line, you mark those in condition A, B, or C. If the farmer wishes to put in any complementary actions on the map, that you put those in as well on GLAMS. For geotagged photographs, this is the number that's needed: 1 for each field, 1 for each hedgerow or stone wall in each condition type A or B in each field, 1 for each margin width per field. If it's a multi-species lay and you're unable to tell the species because it's not grown up enough and you want to use a seed label for this year, you need a photo of that seed label. And for farmers claiming a late meadow bonus payment, you need 1 photo of that submitted within 5 days of mowing the field. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. And we have our final poll of the day, just to test people's attention again. So it's a quick poll. I hope you can see it there. A late meadow bonus payment can be claimed up to the end of what month? Is it July, August, or September? Again, unlike glass, where farmers were locked into traditional May hedgerows for 5 years, we're testing out this flexible option in REAP to see farmers can opt in or out for a meadow on a given field in a given year. And we're just testing that out as part of this project. So if people could just indicate their... So as there's a few questions, I suppose, coming in as well, and just to clarify a couple of things on the complementary actions, you can mix complementary actions, so you can do a mixture of tree planting and hedgerow planting on the same farm. But as Tara said, they must be in the REAP fields themselves, or the fields that have been scored under the project. And the minimum area is 2 hectares. So and the maximum is 10 between both multi-species and legs. So it's not 10 each, it's 10 between the two, and the minimum area is 2 hectares. So from the point of view of scoring, then obviously the fields themselves, there has been some questions on that as well. You must enter you must score the fields in leg, even if on some fields or isolated fields may not get into a payment. They could be 3 or less. You still must submit those scores up in GLAMS to make the applicant eligible for REAP. So I'll just close the poll here now and share it with you. So answer B, August, was the correct answer. So up to the 31st of August, so from the 1st of July to the 31st of August, late meadow bonuses can be cut and claimed. And as Tara said, they must submit a geotagged photograph either by the farmer or advisor within 5 days of the cutting event as well. So, and also there will be a question on GLAMS for the late cut meadows. So you, as advisor, have to indicate which fields have been claimed for the late meadow. So it's a 2-part claim process which we're testing there. There's some questions as well about the locations of trees. I mean, trees can be planted. The idea of the complementary actions is to complement and improve the boundary score in year 2. So broadly speaking, we expect trees to be planted in lines along at least existing boundaries or within new field margins. You could plant small amount in groves behind margins as well if you have the wider margins. But the idea behind the complementary actions is to help that linear score in year 2 by planting these actions. So that's basically it. I mean, the farmer, yes, we will make AgriSnap available to farmers so they can take some of these photographs both for the complementary actions and for the late meadow bonus claim. As Tom said yesterday, there are a couple of questions on AgriSnap. It's not in the app stores yet, but will be as soon as it's available. But we'll update you further on that next week. David, if you're there, can you change me back to presenter so I can switch to the last presentation? As Tara said, there were some issues with the, some people had sound issues at the end of the session when I put up this clarification on the scorecard, which Tara has just referred to. I'll just try and share the screen now. Can we see that?
Not at the moment, Jerome.
Is it there now? Yeah, so it's just to clarify that there's a typo in the scorecard, the LIG scorecard on question 3. So we're talking about the structure question.
Sorry, Jerome.
Jerome,
It's
is
just
that there
showing
yet?
the quick poll.
Okay, I'll have to. I can't stop the poll, can I?
Well,
Can you close the poll, David?
there, it's done there. It should be closed there now.
Okay, can you see the slide?
Not at the moment, just seeing your details.
It's saying waiting to view it.
There you go.
Now we can see it.
You can see it now. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. But just basically to clarify that on question 3 of the LIG scorecard, that there's a typo in the third component, the structure, the good structure. So it should read tall, medium, and short vegetation throughout, and litter levels, or litter levels less than or equal to 25%. So as Tara said, we'll correct that on the online version in the REAP website.